now we take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has recognized the new leadership of the African Democratic Congress led by Senator David Mark. This development follows a period of internal restructuring within the party, which culminated in the emergence of new national officers aimed at repositioning the ADC ahead of future electoral contests. Alongside Mark, other principal officers now officially acknowledged by INEC include Rauf Aribishola as National Secretary, Dr. Ibrahim Mani as National Treasurer, Akibu Dalatu as National Financial Secretary, and Professor Oseremen Osumbo as National Legal Advisor. With this formal endorsement, the ADC leadership is expected to commence a nationwide reconciliation and mobilization effort as the party seeks to strengthen its presence across the country ahead of the 2027 general elections. Meanwhile, as the race towards the 2027 general election gathers momentum, the Independent National Electoral Commission and the Nigeria Police Force have warned political parties against embarking on early campaigns in violation of the electoral law. INEC Chairman Mahmoud Yakubu lamented that parties had already kicked off subtle campaigns despite clear provisions that restricted such activities to 150 days before the polls. Arise correspondent Benga Ashiru reports.
By the rising cases of election posters and billboards flooding the public space ahead of 2027 elections, a flagrant disregard for the campaign rules which only permits election campaigns at just 150 days before the election dates. The Independent Electoral Commission is initiating a roundtable of stakeholders within the election value chain on the implications of jumping the gun in electoral campaigns. The matter of premature election campaigns might be easier said than done with unregulated social media political activities and the challenge of identifying third-party political agents.
You are campaigning when you even don't know people that are doing many posters on your behalf. You see, Mr. President, posters from the airport to wherever you can reach in Abuja today. I'm sure if you see some of these posters, you will be surprised. So who do you hold liable? Is the party or the person? Because we must be careful so that we will not create a situation where the law will be used to hunt some people.
Defying the odds, advocacy for strong adherence to electoral rules with a level playing field for politicians and political parties continue to ring loud, particularly as it affects pre-election campaigns and transparency of the forthcoming 2027 elections.
The problem of early campaign in Nigeria is not new. The seeming inability of the Commission and other regulatory agencies to deal with the menace within the ambit of the existing legal framework calls for deep reflection.
All candidates and their parties, and especially incumbent office holders and their political parties, should be vicariously held responsible and penalized for premature campaigns for them by third parties.
After a long-drawn reflection on the need to check illegal election campaigns, there seemed to be an overriding consensus on the need to protect the sanctity of the ballot and the nation's electoral integrity. Benga Ashiru, Arise News.
The Nigeria Labour Congress, NLC, yesterday asked the federal government to carry out a comprehensive audit of power sector infrastructure and review of the entire privatization model. While reacting to the reported collapse of the national grid, which threw most states of the country into darkness, the Labour movement called on government to stop further deployment of public resources to support the privatized entities. In a statement signed by its president, Joe Ajaero, NLC said that the federal government should undertake a fundamental review of the privatization model itself with a view to reviving this critical sector. The latest incident took place around 11:20 a.m. yesterday, leaving just 20 megawatt supply to Ibadan Distribution Company, DISCOs, out of the 12 power distributors currently in existence in the country. However, as of 8:21 p.m., electricity had been restored to the tune of 1,583 megawatts as Abuja Disco had the lion's share of 243 megawatts. Ikeja Disco had 239 megawatts, while Eko Disco was supplied 204 megawatts, according to the data available. Moving on to other stories, the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, NUPRC, yesterday disclosed that it has approved 94 decommissioning and abandonment D&A plans since April 2023, representing total liabilities of $4.424 billion arising from all field development plans submitted within this period. The Commission stated that this was done in strict alignment with the Petroleum Industry Act of 2021, explaining that these liabilities would be remitted progressively over the production life of the respective fields into designated escrow accounts. The Chief Executive of the Commission, Gbenga Komolafe, who made this disclosure during his remarks at the Nigerian Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative NEITI Companies Forum in Lagos, explained that over $400 million in decommissioning liabilities had already been secured by the organization. All right, Rufai, from the NUPRC, oil and gas, go to power. Yeah. The grid has collapsed again yesterday. Yeah. And of course, politics. INEC saying that don't campaign early. There are rules and regulations around this. Your take on some of the stories this morning.
Okay, you see, I made a statement yesterday. I said it is best for our labor leaders to have a research department so that they don't just talk and miss. And that point again comes to bear as regards what Joe Ajero said. It's obvious that there's no research department in this labor. Maybe save for the days of the likes of my friend Peter Esele. That's when you really had rigor in labor. But today it's a joke, and that's why they can make faulty arguments like NUPRC was making. They can make faulty arguments like TUC was making about a law that not even been implemented yet and calling for strike. Ajero is saying they should sanction the disco companies and everything. The biggest part of the argument is not making is the state of the grid that needs to Premature operate. And let me give you empirical data. Average generation in megawatts from January to August has averaged 4,809. The stranded generation is about 1,866 megawatts. So even if you push on the grid can hardly take everything generated. So how is the problem of the Gencos that MBET is still owing money to today? The money is going to about 6 trillion. They are pushing electricity on the grid, but what is the state of the grid? You can say, okay, government stop supporting people and the fact that they've privatized and everything. The truth is, even if the generation companies push electricity out on this grid that has a lot of comma, you have a collapsing. Yeah. You have power that is stranded, that is not utilized. So the problem should be about the grid system and NISO. But we like to throw the baby away with the bathwater. Now we are blaming the Gencos. Oh, because government is funding and everything. In his arguments, Joe Ajero did not also talk about the debts being owed the Gencos.
Yes, we spoke about that yesterday.
So if you are saying government is funding and everything, is government putting the full money to MBET? No. There's a short from over 200 billion on a monthly basis that the monies are accruing. You hear Joe Ogaji said it yesterday. It's not talking about the debt owed them. It's not talking about the fact that if you pay them their debt, they will be able to service their bank encumbrances. Even some of the initial buyers of these companies have been taken over because they couldn't settle their bank encumbrances. So you can see why we say, if not for anything, Labour should at least have a research department. And please, if I see my great Egbo, the likes of Ogaremu, I would tell him that maybe that's what they should be teaching people in their school where they treat trade unionists. The need for research, because I want a country where trade unions will be able to make very verifiable arguments, not just emotional arguments. Secondly, this morning, I want to talk about campaign. Everybody has fallen short of this initial early campaigning. The question is, INEC will not sanction anybody because INEC is burdened with a lot before. Part of the resolutions pushed forward in the Wins Commission report was even to be able to stratify INEC in such a way that they will be able to attend to many things. Just like INEC cannot fix the problem of electoral offenses. In fact, you talk about a separate independent commission for electoral offenses was muted, but it's going to increase the bureaucratic oversight. So this one early campaign, INEC, because if you want to sanction everybody, you even sanction the media too. Everybody is complicit here. You sanction the advertising companies, you sanction the bill, and they talk about third party. There's nothing called third party. It is these same politicians that are orchestrating from one part. There is no big political ad that goes up that people don't know about. Who are the third parties? There is no third party. It is the same politicians that are funding and orchestrating all sorts of political groups, the 1816 movement. As a month ago, when I was in Abuja, I started seeing President Bola Tinubu 2027 poster.
Only the first year.
You get?
2023. Yeah.
So we have started seeing months of, so the same for ADC, so the same for other political parties. You can see them, 2027 already, achievements here and go. So who do they want to sanction? Who do they want to hold? I think what is most important that INEC should be able to do as a regulation is to allow for equal exposure when the political campaign starts. See, some NGO did a research and showed that political TV stations were exclusively biased in the last election. In fact, they cited a particular TV station that took about 17 stories of the APC in a news bulletin or 14 stories and didn't balance it with other political parties.
That's NBC.
Right. Yeah?
That's NBC's remit, isn't it?
No. There was an NGO that did a research and they talked about...
I'm saying the National Broadcasting
Yeah, that's NBC's remit.
That's
and INEC too should be able to also call for it.
True.
And penalize the NBC strongly. But Arise here fall on the threshold of balance. Fair and balance. Out of most of the stations, Arise was balanced. That report is out there. They also looked at radio stations and everything. Because you see, there are very steep laws in other climes. No, we are very fair and balanced here. There's also what's it called, steep rules in other climes that in a case where you give one political party audience over the other, you can be sanctioned. I think that's the only thing we should call for. But in terms of political campaign, it's always been a culture and it will continue. But we must look for a lot of fairness in the political coverage. It should be skewed towards one over the other. That's just my point here.
Thank you.
Let me deal with the INEC issue first and foremost. Now, it's a very fine balance. Where do you draw the line between free speech and campaigns? Now, persons who are involved in political activities, they are also citizens. They are also entitled to free speech. To say, oh, I'm interested in this. This is what I think about, the polity. You cannot say, for example, that Mr. Peter Obi is campaigning when he speaks, or that Atiku Abubakar is campaigning. There's that territory that allows opposition figures to make free speech. However, I see where INEC and Professor Atari Ujega, where they're coming from. Because the electoral process, whether in Nigeria or elsewhere, is a rules-based process. And what is the rule? You are told that, look, campaigns cannot start until XYZ time. If you are told, for example, that you can't start campaign, as our law says, until 150 days before the election, if you start earlier, it will look like you are breaking the law. However, there is a lacuna within the law, within the electoral framework in that regard. One of the outcomes of the Waste Committee was that there should be an National Electoral Offenders Commission. Even this present head of the INEC has asked for it, that people should be sanctioned if they break the laws. Now, if you don't have a regime in place for ensuring sanction for bad behavior, then of course, you find yourself in a rather incongruous situation when you then insist that people must behave according to the rules. What we're asking for in Nigeria is a strictly rules-based political process, not just a rules-based political process. The conversation since the 2023 general election has been about reform. electoral reform, those who are involved in the subject have identified several issues that require reform. Now, what is the urgency of now that the Tinubu administration is applying to this electoral reform, either in terms of gender representation, or in terms of security protocols, or in terms of the adoption and application of technology, or in terms even of the organizational process by INEC itself? Nobody is talking about that. And that, I hope not, will be the major issue in the 2027 general elections. That is that about that. As for grid collapse, they say the grid collapse and all that. No, I think it's a crying shame. It is embarrassing. It is indefensible that a country of over 200 million people, that we only provide about 2,000 megawatts. The megawatts that is provided has never gone beyond 4,000 megawatts. In fact, under critical situations, it goes down to 1,000 megawatts. Okay, NLC now is saying, oh, there has been a collapse of the grid. This grid collapsed 11 times in 2024. Only those who are ignorant and dumb and deaf will not remember that in 2024, this same national grid collapsed over 10 times. And we said at that time that this grid will continue to collapse. This grid is also collapsing in 2025, putting people in very difficult situations. Only yesterday we were talking about Ethiopia doing the Grand Renaissance Dam that they have spent over 5 billion to put together. No, shorn of the diplomatic complications involved in that Renaissance Dam, you saw a country called Ethiopia that said, look, we have to give our people electricity, 101 million of them. What is the position of the Nigerian government on this grid collapse? What is the government doing? About a month ago, the government said, okay, there are legacy debts in this section, 4.424 trillion, they said. Now, President Tinubu called a meeting and said, look, we should double check this and all of that. No, but the issue is not just about debt. The government of Nigeria controls the Transmission Commission of Nigeria, the TCN. Now we have a story about that, Manitoba and all of that. I don't want to go into all of that. You know, that's not relevant to this current conversation. But what we have not done is that we have not worked out that framework properly. Instead, what you get is this asinine talk that, oh, the governments before now that did a review of the electricity sector, they didn't do it well. They gave attention to their own cronies, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what have you done to address the situation? What you get is a lot of blamed trading. Gencos, we say we are not the problem. Disco, we say we are not the problem. In fact, we are being owed money. Embed, we say nobody is paying us. No, you can't have that in a serious-minded country. And so that's why I cited the example of Ethiopia. Leadership is what matters in this particular regard. Now, as for NUPRC, the contest yesterday was a meeting put together by NETI, the Extractive Industry Transparency Structure. And at that meeting, represented, what's his name, Gbenga Komolafe, who is in charge of the Upstream Regulatory Commission, NUPRC, as it is called, was represented by one of his officials. And they were talking about what they call, is it abandonment, right? Yeah, abandonment and decommissioning plans. And he said, look, these liabilities that we have incurred in that regard, we have up to about 4.4 billion naira in terms of liabilities. What are these abandonment and decommissioning plans? These are wells that used to be very prolific, that the partners in the joint venture agreement abandoned. They will put a Christmas tree there, and then they will leave it. Some of those Christmas trees are not properly secured. The decommissioning is not properly done, and that's why now and again you will have issues in the Niger Delta. Christmas tree blowing up, spill occurring. Okay, so Gbenga Komalafe now says, okay, NUPRC under his watch is going to take a look at this because there are liabilities involved. So if he follows the law, if as he says, he's following the law, then he's right. Because he was coaching, I think, is it section 222, section 223 of the Petroleum and Industry Act of 2001, of 2021. And also, there is a report by Standard & Poor's, S&P, which cited best practice, global standard practice in Australia, in Canada, in Mexico, what you do with abandoned and decommissioned, wells. So to that extent, you can say what the NUPRC is proposing is in line with standard practice. However, there are issues. NNPC is a joint partner in many of these projects. In fact, NNPC owns about 40 to 60%. Now, what does that tell you? Some of the companies that are involved in what they are trying to look for can go to court. There could be a lot of litigation. And they will say, okay, if we say we have this liability of 4.4 billion, what is the NNPC Limited of Nigeria going to do about it? Because those companies, whether it's Shell or it's ExxonMobil, they will want to defend their rights. So does Nigeria have the resources to fight this? So in trying to say we are following the rules, we are trying to grandstand, at the same time, you may not know what other problem that you are opening up. And I hope that in the days to come, some of the people who know these issues and who are involved in it will come forward to tell us the nitty-gritty of this crisis that may be brewing. The other thing is ADC. ADC, very quickly.
Officers.
Now they say David Mark, Senator, is authentic chairman. Yeah. Now they say Comrade Rauf Aregbesola is authentic Secretary General. Now, what this says is that it gives certainty in terms of the competition, the looming competition. It says that the ADC now is properly recognized by the authorities as an authentic opposition party. It will also help the party to gain traction because there were persons who have been very nervous about joining the ADC. Yeah. On this same program, we have had people coming here saying that the ADC is not a political association, it's not a political party because it has not been recognized by INEC. Now, INEC says we recognize it. We recognize the officers. So the game is on. So you will see a lot of traction, you will see a lot of confidence, and people who have been sitting on the fence will now have the confidence to join the ADC. What is our interest as ordinary people, we the ordinary people of Nigeria? We just want all flowers to bloom. Yeah. We want contestation. We want whoever means the best for Nigeria to be the person that will lead this country forward. But I always say, when we discuss this subject, that nobody should assume that the APC will also go and fold his arms. Now that they have registered ADC, President Tinubu will return very quickly from Paris, where he has been holding hands with Emmanuel Macron. Because now, what INEC has said is that, look, there is a game here. There is another prominent political party that has emerged, and we recognize their officers. So let's see what happens hereafter.
All right, prominent political party. I think the next few days and weeks will determine just how prominent, significant, powerful, or a threat the ADC would be to the sitting All Progressives Congress, and of course to the main opposition party as it stands currently, the PDP, and let's not forget the Labour Party as well, following the impacts they made during the last election in 2023, not just at the presidential level, but even at gubernatorial and National Assembly elections or even State House elections. They still have a few hurdles ahead of them. So, well, congratulations are in order for them. National Chairman, despite some of the technicalities in the submission of their forms, and they did say that they thought it would be sorted out within a week, and that we've seen that now happen. There's still some hurdles they'll have to face. I asked a question last week to one of the, to a guest who had come to speak on behalf of the ADC last week, that do they have sufficient time to campaign and to win the confidence of the people in the election? I believe the choice of whoever they would decide as their flag bearer, particularly in the presidential election, will go a long way in determining whether or not they can be taken seriously. In order for that to happen, I mentioned earlier on that they're going on a reconciliation and mobilization exercise across the country. This is critical because there are a number of people who would want to throw their hat in the ring to be the presidential flag bearer of the party. Names have already come up in the air. People like former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, people like Mr. Peter Obi, who will agree to step aside for the other. Would it be on the platform of the ADC? Would they be able to get their acts together? But very importantly, let me even challenge them. What is the ideology of the party? We often talk about how our political parties lack political ideology, and it's just another congregation of people who were not accepted in other parties, or who did not get the party tickets in other parties and come together, or disgruntled members of other leading parties who come together to form a party. Therefore, we don't really have an ideology that the people can hold on to and say, okay, I'm supporting this particular party because this is what they believe in, and this is why I'm going for it. So I think coming up with an ideology would be a good idea as an opposition party. But again, they are now running to the race. Let's see how much work they'll put in to ensure that they have a footing for the 2027 elections. Beyond that, then, let me talk about early campaigns. Now, we often talk about a lot of election infractions that happen, and INEC, maybe because they are overburdened, because they don't have the will to do it or the intention to do it, they just look away. If we look at the 150-day rule for campaigns, I'm sure a lot of people, to some people, it's news. It is coming as a surprise because it's not the norm. In fact, following in the past, what happens is that 2 years is for governance, 2 years for campaign. In this particular cycle, for the 4 years in government, there's been campaigns since Inauguration Day. We've seen the billboards in Abuja. So why didn't INEC speak up at the time? We've seen a number of people come out to speak. I mean, Dr. Bati made the point about free speech and people having their right to talk and not really direct campaign, but we see direct advertising. We see people taking up billboards and talking about their preferred candidates and saying, come 2027. What did INEC do about that? I hear that you can hide behind the excuse of, oh, I don't know who did it. It's just people who love me, my third party surrogates. But when I was in university, and I'm saying such a small community, I ran for election for the student union. Even at that, we had electoral guidelines. And if your poster came up anywhere, whether it was you or somebody else, as long as it's your face that's on that poster, you get penalized. When you get penalized enough, you will tell all your adoring fans not to go and campaign on your behalf. So this excuse around, people are campaigning on their behalf is a point that's dead on arrival, in my view. And if they are really serious about curtailing election infractions, they can do it with the will and with the punishment. Currently, there's the sanctions that apply for people who break the electoral laws are like 500,000 naira in some instances. Is it an APC, PDP, ADC, Labour Party that cannot pay 500,000 naira, or the candidates who spent billions of naira in executing an election that would not be able to pay the sanction of 500,000 naira? It is not a deterrent enough. So if we're serious enough about it, we've often called to go back to the National Assembly to review the Electoral Act and see areas where we can make it watertight and ask for deeper and stiffer punitive measures to discourage this impunity when it comes to breaking electoral laws. But again, the people in the National Assembly are politicians themselves. Would they be willing to put in the law things that may be seen to work against their party or preferred candidates? These are the questions. But if we do run a proper system where the National Assembly members represent the interests of the people and the people have an influence on the elected member, then we might see people push and lobby their representatives to ensure that we strengthen our institutions, strengthen and not make a joke of our electoral processes, such that we put in laws that protect the fairness and the fairness and balance of our electoral processes so that everybody operates on a level playing field. All eyes on INEC this time. We can hold meetings like this, have conversations like this, but if INEC is not serious enough about holding political parties and candidates to account, then we're not going to see anything different come 2027. Now, moving on to that and talking about democratic structure, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Iroagan, because the ADC used the opportunity to talk about that in the report in the This Day newspaper, and I think it's very important, because when we're talking about democratic structures and institutions and the precedents we set for our democratic structures, we must use examples like this to determine just how serious we are about maintaining a democratic structure. I love the argument they make around the fact that it's not just about one individual. In this instance, if democracy is threatened, it's not just about whether she's in PDP or any other party. All opposition political parties should rise up and speak against this anti-democratic action by the Senate leadership by not admitting her back following the expiration of her 6 months suspension. If we look away and say, okay, this is somebody else, it will happen again for another party, and we'll see the high-handedness and undemocratic nature of this particular incident. Beyond that, there's also a gender slant. We often talk about inclusion, having more women in politics. When we see the way that this is handled, it is discouraging and almost as if it is targeted at the most vulnerable and minor figures in the National Assembly. Very quickly, the national grid collapsed. Yesterday, the grid collapsed again for the umpteenth time, and we've pushed on this table again and again the quality or the state of our grid and the investments that have been made over the years. There is no justification yet for the billions of naira that has been invested in the power sector. I often call for heads to roll. At this point, the Minister of Power should be accountable for why Nigerians are spending so much money on power, yet we cannot get it right. We understand the economic impact of this and how this affects small businesses and businesses at large if we cannot get our power working. I don't know what will happen to the $1 trillion economy if we're not able to get power right.